There's a million different ways that you can approach improvising a solo, and it can feel very overwhelming at times and hard to decide on where to start. But at the same time, it's very easy to fall into the trap of playing the same thing the same way over and over again and naturally getting pretty bored of it. Today we're going to talk about little things that you can do to make your soloing a lot more musical and a lot more exciting and fun. But be sure to stick around till the very end of the lesson because I've got a free gift for you and your guitar that you're both going to love. Now typically when we want to get into soloing, we'll start by learning a scale and we'll think, okay, cool, I got the tool that I need, now I can just go. And that will work for a time, but after a while you start to feel like you need something more. So what you'll do is learn more scales and think that that'll just mathematically make you more musical and more inspiring as a player. As long as you have more tools to use, it should work out, right? But all that does is give you more material to approach the same kind of way. You may have heard the term noodling before, where it's just kind of like random playing without intention that just doesn't really inspire you and, like I said, gets boring pretty fast. And when I encountered this very same problem, what I did to change that was just change the way I was listening to what I was soloing over. Because you got to take into account, if you're soloing over a backing track or over your favorite record or with a band, right? You're soloing over a progression. There's something going on. There's a musical backdrop that's essentially lifting you up and giving you the chance to shine. And you want to make sure that you're paying respect to that musical backdrop and letting it inspire you to come up with ideas that are much more freeing and much less noodly. So take, for example, that backing track that I played over in the beginning of the video. It's in the key of E major, and it's essentially got 4 chords throughout the whole thing, played in different orders depending on what section we're at, right? So it's essentially E, B, C sharp minor, and A. Those 4 chords make up the entire backing track, and like I said, they're just played in a different order depending on what section. And I think the main section of it is actually C sharp minor, A, E, B. So if you were to think in terms of the natural number system, in case you're hip to that, it's 6 minor, 4, 1, 5. That's that chord progression. So we have those 4 chords to work with. Now, since we're in the key of E major, right, which you may be thinking, well, it starts on a C sharp minor chord. Why isn't it the key of C sharp minor? Well, it's actually correct to say either one because they're relatives of each other. So the E major and the C sharp minor are relative minor major of each other. So the relative minor of E major is C sharp minor, and the relative major of C sharp minor is E major, but we always want to err on the side of major when we're describing a chord progression, so we'll just say E major. So that being said, E major pentatonic will probably work wonders over a backing track like this, which would be right here. So on the fretboard, you're going to start on the 9th fret of the low E string, and then the 12th fret, and that's going to be our root note right here, our major root note. That's an E right there. Then we're going to play 9-11 on A, 9-11 on D, 9-11 on G, 9-12 on B, 9-12 on high E. And we have 3 major root notes, 3 E's, one here, and one here. And in the context, very major, happy sounding, it's not like minor pentatonic. That wouldn't work over a backing track like this. It's very majory, right? It's very happy sounding, very bright sounding. So we want to add to that tonality. So we're going to stick with E major pentatonic as our scale that we're going to use. But even just using that scale, even though it will work for a while, like I said, after a while it's going to feel uninspired, boring. It's going to get easy to get lost in noodles and stuff like that. So what can we do to make that more inspiring and make, really spruce things up as far as the scale is concerned? Well, since we have 4 chords in the entire backing track as our example, right? Each one of those chords contains specific notes, specific target notes, also known as chord tones, right? That essentially highlight those chords as the progression is moving. And when you follow along with those notes as that progression is moving, like I said, then you're actually going to be highlighting the chords as they're moving, right? So it comes down to that movement, right? Paying attention to the chord changes as they're happening. You're going to be moving along with the chords in your playing. So you're not just going to play one scale, sort of just zone out and then just play that scale, because that's a recipe for noodles, right? And just boring playing. So we want to be more musical and have more intention. So obviously it'll require some more brain power, right? We're going to have to really listen and pay attention. But we already know now, we have the 4 chords are in this order, right? In the start point we have C sharp minor, A, E, and B. Now what if I told you we can find the chord tones for all 4 of those chords right here in the neighborhood of the E major pentatonic? What do you say we explore that? So starting with the 6 minor chord, right? C sharp minor. It's actually the chord itself, at least this bar chord version that we're playing right here, is right here in the neighborhood of the E major pentatonic. So I can actually arpeggiate this chord, stay right within this neighborhood, and I'll find all the chord tones, which by the way, we only need 3 per chord, 3 chord tones, a root, a third, and a fifth. That's all we got to remember, okay? So we have, essentially we're going to arpeggiate or like play through a broken up chord tones, right, for this chord. That's a C sharp minor arpeggio, and it's all comprised of roots, thirds, and fifths. So we have root, third, fifth, root, third, fifth, root, third, and it stops there because we're just going to stay within this region here, right? So plenty of roots, plenty of thirds, and plenty of fifths. So those are all chord tones. Those are all chords or notes, right, that make up the chord. And they're all right there within the E major pentatonic. So now we've switched. We have now, this is our root note, like a minor root note, right? And we have the minor thirds, and then we got the fifths. So all of those will come in handy. Pretty much any of those 3 notes that we play, especially accentuating that C sharp minor chord, will prove useful. So that's 1 chord. Next we have the A chord, right? The 4 chord. Now, we want to be able to play an A arpeggio, or at least something close to it, right here in this region, and it would happen to look like this. Right? Still within the region, but now we're highlighting an A, right? An A major chord. So here are the notes. We have a third here, a fifth, a root, a third, fifth, root, third, fifth, and then we have our A major arpeggio right there. And we're still within the E major pentatonic shape here. So just taking those 2 chords as an example, before we get to the other 2, we can take this, we can kind of in tandem play scale type licks, right? Like, you know. And then we can also consider, you know, like highlighting those different chords. Like if, let's say we were playing it over the backing track and we would highlight those chords as they came along in the progression, then we would be essentially playing over the chord changes. So those are the first 2 chords. The other chord we have is our 1 chord, E major, which essentially we kind of already have covered with E major pentatonic, but if we wanted to arpeggio it, right, or at least break it up into its roots, thirds, and fifths, it would look something like this. Now this one's a pretty unergonomic shape. Just to show you, we got root, third, fifth, root, third, fifth, root. Just to show you that we got all the necessary components to make up that arpeggio. We got those notes there. But again, that's already covered with the E major pentatonic, so we can essentially think of the E major pentatonic, all those additional notes, but we have those roots, thirds, and fifths contained within if we wanted to be really chord tony with it. But hey, real quick, if you're getting value out of this lesson, please consider hitting that like button and subscribing to our YouTube channel. It really helps us out, and it lets us know that you want to see lessons just like this one, which we'd be more than happy to give you. So thanks in advance, and let's get back to business. And then finally we have our 5 chord B major, and this arpeggio shape is going to be interesting. It's essentially 1 note per string, so again, not very ergonomic, compared to like a couple of the other arpeggio shapes, but we want to be able to pinpoint those notes. So we have a third, fifth, root, fifth, right? Root, third. And that's essentially, right? Essentially notes within a B major arpeggio. Again, right there in that same neighborhood between the 9th and 12th frets on our fretboard. Okay, now before I turn the backing track on, let me just run through those chords essentially in the order that they appear in that first section of the backing track. C sharp minor, A, E, B major. This is what they would look like if I were to really accentuate those chord tones. So that's an example of, without any backing track for reference, you can hear the chord changes happening if I were to strictly stick to the chord tones. But even with that, it still like makes sense musically, and you could say mathematically, right? Since we're playing over the chord changes, but it still lacks a little bit of spice. It lacks some expression, some soul. So let's talk about how we can combine more scale style playing with those chord tones to actually make a pretty potent musical mixture. So what I'll do now is I'm going to throw on that backing track and I'm going to focus on those chord tones and really listen for the changes, but I'm also going to throw in some, E major pentatonic licks in tandem and just kind of see what happens. Alright, so in that example, I was thinking about the chord changes, right? Remembering the order. C sharp minor, A, E, B, okay? And just thinking in terms of those chord tone little arpeggio shapes that we found right there within the E major pentatonic pattern, and then also throwing in some very, pentatonic kind of licks just to make it seem more deliberate, more on purpose, and ultimately more musical. So that's a way that you can inject much more musicality in what you're doing without really having to break too much new ground on what you're used to. So if you're used to wailing on a pentatonic scale, let's say, if you were to just memorize those chord tone patterns right there within the same neighborhood of that scale, take the time to get used to active listening to the changing of the chords. And of course, it's not going to happen overnight, but you want to take some time, you want to really be listening, and after a while you're going to start to anticipate the chord changes so that you can really lead with your licks going into the chord progression, knowing exactly what's going to land, and that's going to give you even more intention, right? And put you even more in control. And the more control you're in, the less noodling you're going to do. So what we've just gone over is a powerful approach to breaking out of that rut, just noodling and just randomly playing through a scale without really injecting any expression or musicality to it, when all you have to do is think about the chord changes, think about how they change and how they move, and just highlight them as they move, and you're going to be able to still get your fill playing all those scale licks, but you're going to feel a lot more inspired, and it's going to feel a lot more fresh and new to your own ears. But we've only explored just one context where this would work. Imagine being able to do it over any musical key and in multiple different styles. That would be the logical next step, right? But you won't have to worry about where you're going to take that step. I've already done that thinking for you. Remember that free gift I told you about? Since you've made it this far in the video, I got to make good on my promise, so here it is. This right here is your free copy of my fretboard conveyor belt system. Something that I've developed over years and years of being frustrated with my playing, finding the solutions that not only work for me, but for thousands of other guitar players online that have already been using this for the past few years, and the results have been incredible. I'm very proud to say. Be sure to click here to claim your copy, or check the link in the description box. I'm super stoked to see where your guitar playing is going to go from here, because once this Pandora's box has been opened, there is no closing it, and it's only going to get a lot more fun.